Welcome back to the ALCS Velo podcast. I'm Adam Cohen alongside Henry Winkelhake. And Henry, we have another playoff edition of the ALCS Velo podcast. And this is not our episode number 51. And the Rays can clinch tonight, even though they are down 3-2 against the Astros.
Yeah, we missed having you on last week for episode 50, Adam. We know you were with us in spirit, though. So I thanked you from afar last week. I'll thank you again. Thank you for being here week in, week out, and making it happen, man. And yeah, like you said too, the Rays looking to put out the Astros tonight, although they are behind right now. I think pretty much the baseball world as a whole is rooting for the Astros at this point to banish those evil Astros. I'm sure Houston fans would disagree, but for the most part, Tampa Bay, I'm proclaiming them America's team at this point.
I would agree with you because the Rays are such an underdog team. There were so many jokes before the playoffs started, like, hey, the Rays will do great in this playoff atmosphere because they don't have fans at their ballpark anyway, even though there will probably be fans in the World Series. Because at the Braves-Dodgers game, there's 10,000 fans there, which is pretty insane. Which I had
Is that right?
Yeah, I looked at the attendance the other day. I didn't even hear about that. I thought that'd be more mainstream.
Yeah, you're literally breaking the news to me right now, man. I had no idea.
Initial reaction here of Henry.
That's wild, but I mean, if it can be done safely, I think that's certainly an awesome treat for those fans that get to see live baseball in 2020. And that's the type of thing you might tell your grandkids years from now. I was one of a couple thousand people who saw a Major League Baseball game in person in 2020.
That's true. They could say that. And even the fans that go to see the World Series, I got to see the 2020 World Series, which will forever be an asterisk or forever be a very peculiar World Series in everyone's book.
It will be interesting to see how that goes down when all is said and done. And I think it's a mostly legitimate champion. I mean, you're giving out the trophy, and certainly it's not like they're just giving it away. Hey, you got to go out and earn it this year with the expanded playoffs and all the other challenges that you're overcoming. But certainly a funky season and different than any other. So it will, perhaps some form of asterisk will have to be assigned.
You talked about a funky season. Both our teams got eliminated from postseason contention. That really hurt last week when I watched Game 5, especially since Chapman once again blew it. I actually did write a recent article for Bat Sports page about how it's not his fault. It's more Boone's fault and the analytics department and just how the Yankees weren't as equipped this year. But I digress. It's been a fun LCS, however. And as you mentioned earlier, the Rays are America's team, or just any team but the Astros are America's team. And I don't know if you feel this way too, but it's kind of weird to hate the Astros when they're in the playoffs because we saw them for so many years before, and I kind of enjoyed them. I enjoyed Jose Altuve and George Springer, and then Zach Greinke with his weird antics. So it's weird to really hate them on this national stage.
Not only that is a really, I mean, all things aside, if you didn't know they were cheaters, they would be a really likable group of guys, but just the way that they came back, and it was the perfectly executed rebuild, and they were like the worst team in baseball for 3-4 years. They really did tank and do it. And then it was nice to see them succeeding at first when they were the Astros that had so recently been so bad. But everybody does hate them now, like you said, Adam, and I think they totally brought that upon themselves. But I'm glad you recapped a little bit too on that ALDS series because, yeah, you reminded me we hadn't actually wrapped that up last time we did our show. I believe last Thursday the Yankees were actually still fighting to force that Game 5, and I know you didn't like the way it ended up, but it was a really exciting Game 5, and we haven't had very many exciting elimination winner-take-all games in this playoff. I mean, part of that being no wild card one-game round to start things off, but yeah, I think we've missed a little bit of that winner-take-all action.
Well, as you mentioned, there wasn't that one-game wildcard game playoff. There were a couple teams that came back from a 1-0 deficit in the wildcard series, but of course, in the ALDS, Yankees were the only team to, I believe they were to push it to 5. So that was heartbreaking for those who don't know the background of it. Mike Brosseau, who is a second-year rookie, he was undrafted going into the major leagues. and he was thrown at by a 101-mile-per-hour pitch by Chapman this year, and he struck out to end the game. They had an altercation. The next day, it's 2 home runs against the Yankees, and then in the playoffs, he's doing pretty well. He's a pretty nifty fielder, has a lot of pop, and then he smoked a go-ahead home run against Chapman in the 8th inning. And that was a pretty insane at bat. Chapman threw a 101-mile-per-hour fastball or so. That ball went out 105 miles per hour. It's a 10-pitch at bat, as mentioned. And Chapman actually looked pretty good that night, too. And he just got beat. What can you say?
Yeah. That's poetic justice, almost, it seems, that it would happen exactly like that. Those same 2 guys facing off on the mound after that altercation earlier in the year. And to be honest, I missed the entire thing. I was watching the game. I sat down. I watched all of Game 5. Then I had to go pick up my stinking brother from the airport. So somewhere while I'm getting in the car and pulling the game up on the radio, I missed the home run. So I hear the Rays come back, and I guess it would have been the top of the 9th. And the Rays I'm listening to a Rays broadcast, and I'm hearing the Rays announcers getting so excited, like with each passing out. And I'm like, I thought this was a tie game. Like they're talking like they're about to like seal this thing, seal the deal, and win the series. And then they get out number 3, start going crazy, and like, okay, I guess I must have missed a go-ahead run in the last inning. And later I found out that that's how it went down. And Adam, I'm sure that must have been crushing as a Yankees fan.
Yeah, I definitely drowned my sorrows, to say the least, later that night. So that was a little bit rough, but it's good for baseball. I had one of my best friends call me. His name's Dallas. He was actually on one of our podcasts. He's one of my buddies from Israel, and he just said, how does it feel having the Yankees lose? And he was rubbing my face, but it's all in good fun. We both agreed it's just really good for baseball what the Rays are doing right now, and especially what they're doing to the bullpen, which just making the segue into the ALCS, I think that's been a huge focal point throughout the playoffs and throughout the championship series, and how they have guys left and right. They're stable forces, as they call them, who they mix and match very well. They can be used in almost any situation, almost any different day, and their bullpen depth is some of the best that we've seen in a long time.
And I absolutely agree with you, and that I think it's great for baseball too, because the Rays model of success, what they've done in building their bullpen, yes, they are smarter than everybody with the matchups. And I'm not saying that it's easy to replicate that level of intelligence in playing the matchups, but their budget that they've allocated to their bullpen, every team in baseball can spend that amount of money. The Rays really have almost made a point of not spending money on their bullpen, and still somehow they just have all this talent in the bullpen. They have 3 guys who throw 100+ miles an hour. I don't really know how that ended up working so well with their budget. So maybe not everybody will get quite that lucky, but I do think it is encouraging for the game to see a small market team like that to kind of take the money ball approach, and just goes to show that, you don't have to be the Yankees. You don't have to be the Cubs. You don't have to be the Dodgers. You don't have to have these huge big market team budgets to make it work, that the little guys can win sometimes too.
And the Rays have really, since they last made the World Series in 2008, have been a revolutionary team. They're led by Joe Madden, who revolutionized the shift, and that's the reason why it's so pertinent in today's game. And now they have the opener, and using a non-closer typical role, they'll use Nick Anderson the 5th inning the other day, or one of the games in the series, and he's one of the best relievers out there. I think he had a sub-1 or just around 1 ERA throughout the season, throws 98. He was a big acquisition from the Marlins, and I really like your point about how the bullpen can maybe not be overspent, because look, for the Yankees, Aroldis Chapman, highest paid closer of all time by his contract, and then you look at Nick Anderson, the Rays bullpen, they don't make really anything, and they're still elite. And it's interesting because everyone throws really 95+ now in the MLB draft, so you don't have to have them in these starters roles. You can just put them in the bullpen, and relievers are not all too consistent, so you can just keep drafting guys. They'll keep throwing 95, keep putting the bullpen, and I know there's a lot more that goes into it than just what I'm breaking down right now, but that's kind of maybe the way that's going to be forward.
And yeah, man, you mentioned Chapman and all the money going to him from the Yankees. Cubs do the same thing. Craig Kimbrell, we gave him $100+ million contract. He comes in and has been largely terrible, which he did kind of start to figure it out down the stretch. I will give credit to Craig Kimbrell for his September, but it's kind of just the nature of how relief pitchers are that it's so inconsistent in the production year over year to where most of the time it probably doesn't make sense to hand out these big contracts. I mean, if you're going to do it, a guy like Aroldis Chapman or track record like Craig Kimbrell, it probably does make more sense than other guys. But I mean, I would tend to think that the Rays are doing it right and making small investments in high upside guys and not really locking in too much money to any one asset. I think that is probably the way to hedge your bets and the way to go forward. But looking back, breaking down this AL series, that the Rays really jumped out at the gate and took command with going up 3-0. Were there really any moments so far in that series, Adam, that stood out to you as series defining?
I just think the defense from the Rays have been really defining. For example, the previous day, Kevin Kiermaier had a leaping grab that nearly robbed a home run. Meadows had some nice grabs. Joey Wendell has been incredible at third base. Also, G-Man Choi, give it up to the big guy who was also a former Yankee at one point, just having cat-like reflexes at first and doing splits, which you would not expect out of someone of his caliber. So their defense has been excellent. They're just a scrappy team, and I know that during the regular season they did a really good job of not allowing runners in scoring position to be scored, and they've kept that trend throughout the playoffs. And we saw the Astros have 20 runners left on base through games 1 and 2, 10 each game, and that was really their downfall in the first 2 games of the series.
Absolutely. And you hit on it there at the end. I think the clutch pitching for the Rays, to where maybe you're bending, but you're not breaking, allowing those base runners, but then not allowing the Astros to cash in on those opportunities. That's been big. Charlie Morton, Blake Snell, and Ryan Yarbrough were all phenomenal for the Rays in their starts, 3 starts to start the series. And those Astro bats, we've seen them starting to heat up throughout the postseason, but so far the Rays have really done a great job of shutting them down. Even in the Game 4 win last night for the Astros, only 4 runs allowed in the game, and Glasnow, he did allow all 4 of those, but he's still having a pretty good postseason overall, and that just goes to show all the talent that the Rays have in their pitching rotation and in that bullpen. It's overmatched Houston for the most part so far.
Henry, I don't know if you feel this way, but with the 2020 Rays, it almost reminds me of the 2015 Royals.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting comparison. And it's easy to draw that comparison when it's kind of the smaller market, lower budget band of misfits getting it done with good pitching, albeit.
It's just like they do everything right, and you see how the Astros defense, and again, not capitalizing in big situations. I mean, that's been a trend throughout the playoffs as a whole, because I know that during the ALCS, the Yankees scored like 71%, or ALDS, scored like 71% of their runs on home runs. I know the Rays was a similar margin. That's been throughout the playoffs. We saw a strikeout record between 2 teams in a 9-inning game, most strikeouts in history. I believe it was like 37, I believe, or so. And that's really the way the game is going. So a lot of teams are losing runners in scoring position. That's every team, including the Rays. And it's kind of like home run or bust, essentially. The Astros won yesterday because of a 2-run homer from George Springer. And there are other 2 runs given from a home run from Altuve and a double from Altuve.
Yeah, I like you said too, Adam. I think that moving towards the 3 true outcomes, definitely the direction that this game has been trending for some time now, for better or for worse. And certainly the long ball is exciting, but kind of on the flip side of that equation, the strikeouts are not so exciting to sit by and watch so long go by without the ball being put into play, which granted, it is still awesome if you're a fan of great pitching to watch what these starting pitchers and relievers are able to do these days. So, I mean, it's still good baseball. I'm not gonna argue that, but it makes the home run that much more important. That, you know, we've seen the stat several times throughout the postseason. It's something like 95+% of the time when you out homer your opponent in the playoffs, you end up winning. I mean, that's really the key to victory, is getting the long ball and preventing it on the other side. And that's what baseball is now, I guess.
Another change that we've been seeing, and especially prominent this year in the playoffs, is that whatever measure baseball has been trying to take to try to slow down the game, it has not been working in the playoffs. Every game is at least 3.5 hours long. Most of them go 4. I know a couple of days ago between the Rays and the Astros, that was a 4 hour and 12. No, that was the Dodgers Braves. That was a 4 hour and 12 minute game in 9 innings, which is ridiculous. That's easily one of the longer 9 inning postseason games of all time. I think that record was set by the Yankees Indians game in the American League Wild Card Series in Game 2. So it's ridiculous how long these games are going. I know both of us love baseball. We want to watch it as much as we can, but it does get a little difficult just with everything that's going on in our own individual lives to just watch the whole thing.
Absolutely. It is very much a commitment to sit down and watch a playoff game in its entirety. And yeah, it definitely feels like the efforts to speed up the game have not carried over into the postseason. And I get that to an extent because you kind of just want to let the game just be how it is in the postseason and let the best team win and just let everything play out. You don't want to try and make that outcome impure in any way. But I mean, it's a tough product to watch when it's a 4+ hour game, like you were saying, Adam. And it definitely feels like the commercial breaks are longer in the playoffs. I don't know if you've gotten that sense, but I mean, I wouldn't really be surprised, I guess, with all the revenue that the league is down this year, if they're just trying to milk all the commercial money that they possibly can out of this postseason. I'm sure somebody out there has got a stopwatch taking time for commercial breaks. I'd be interested to see some data on that.
That would be really cool to see. And I agree with you. There have been a lot of interesting commercials and long commercials, and just how MLB is getting revenue. I think the playoffs have been sponsored by Utz, which is really weird because I would never think of them as a sponsor of a huge sporting event. And they're not the most well-regarded potato chips either. So it's really kind of weird to see them just all over. And they're like, have special events like find the Utz drill throughout the game and like log online to like try to do that. It's a little weird.
It shows you how much I know about Utz. You said potato chips. I thought they only did pretzels, and I'm thinking like maybe they do like the big ballpark pretzels too, and that's the tie-in. But that does strike me as kind of an odd sponsor. I haven't heard a whole lot of Utz and other MLB events or sporting events in general.
Yes, it might only be in 2020, of course. Maybe there's a lack of sponsors, or maybe they saw a golden opportunity, but who knows? We should go a little bit back on track to the series, though. And Henry, in your opinion, who's been performing well and who's been underperforming in the ALCS so far?
Well, I do think one of the obvious goats, in a bad sense, I guess, goat is often a positive thing these days, but I think originally it meant a bad person would be Jose Altuve on the defensive side for sure, which it's kind of hard to call him too much of a goat because he has been playing really well offensively. Adam, I think you have some numbers on the notes to provide for Jose on the offensive side.
Yeah, he has 3 home runs and he also has 3 errors too, and I believe he has a couple of throwing errors as well among those 3 errors. He didn't have 1 throwing error throughout the course of the regular season.
And one of my understandings too is that he seems to have more of a struggle defensively when playing the shift. Mm-hmm. And I believe the Astros, Dusty Baker, tried to correct that last night by having him and Correa switch spots and having Correa play deep in the hole in the second base side on the shift. So maybe Altuve a little more comfortable in that situation. But I know he already did get bailed out tonight from another throwing error. Yuli Gurriel saved him with a nice pick a couple innings ago. So weird to see the yips from the usually sure-gloved Altuve, but kind of, weird to see at the same time a player who's struggling so mightily on one side of the ball is kind of carrying the Astros offense, like you said, Adam.
Usually you don't see it one way or the other. You usually see if they're struggling, they're just struggling entirely. They're struggling offensively, they're struggling defensively. There's almost usually little hope for them, and then they'll find the way out of it. But it is weird to see the stark contrast between the two. And his offense is really kept the Astros alive in the series.
Absolutely. And I guess while I'm mentioning people who are keeping or offenses alive in the series, you got to look at Randy Arozarena. I feel like I totally botched that last name.
I think it's Arozarena, yeah. It's a difficult last name, yeah.
Okay, there we go. I felt like I said it too fast, but that young man for the Rays continuing to put on a clinic. Couple more home runs in this series, I believe. Batting .444 on the postseason, and with a 1.426 OPS in postseason play. He is carrying that Rays offense, and I said a little earlier in the show too that I think their starting pitchers have been really awesome in this series, but I got to give it to the guy who plays every day, Randy Arozarena.
Arozarena. It's
Arozarena.
Yeah. And it's hard to imagine that he came from the Cardinals system. I mean, I guess not hard to imagine that he's a good player from the Cardinals system because they have great players come up every year, but it's hard to imagine that he was traded from them and no one really knew his name. And now the broadcasters for TBS have been calling him the Cuban Mookie Betts, which is a fitting nickname for him because he's played like almost Mookie Betts. He has great speed. He has a good glove. He hits balls out of the ballpark. He can turn on anything inside. And he's been a pleasant surprise, to say the least, for the Rays. And he's been carrying them every single series. And I would not be surprised if he were to win the ALCS MVP. And I do want to mention a dark horse to maybe win the MVP. I think this would be a stretch, but Diego Castillo has really been, I believe, the best reliever for the Rays. He came in 2 save situations, just was lights out on both of them. That was right after he closed out the ALDS, and I think they're using him more in the closer role than Nick Anderson, who's being used in more high leverage situations.
Yeah, Castillo certainly has been a beast in that series so far. He is a dark horse kind of by virtue of his position, and that it's just tough for a reliever to get enough work to make the impact to warrant being the series MVP. But I mean, if there was a team that could make it happen, it's certainly the Rays, with how they've shown that they'll mix up bullpen usage. And he could end up getting a lot of work over the remainder of this series. I know, like you said, they tend to be saving him for the 9th inning, it looks like. But I mean, I guess he could really only get one more save in this series, with the Rays already having the 3 wins. But I mean, maybe they fall behind in the series and they have to use him more creatively, and Castillo gets more work. I can see the path to him potentially being series MVP, but I would go with Arozarena. As I'm still saying that wrong. I'm sorry.
You got right.
Arozarena. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All good.
I appreciate it. But yeah, certainly high praise to call him the Cuban Mookie Betts. And he plays his cards right. Excuse me. He could be going up against the American Mookie Betts in the World Series. So that would certainly be interesting to see, having that comparison been made.
You do make a good point, and I still believe the Rays and Dodgers are the favorites. We will get to that later. But what are the keys for each team to win the series? I feel like for the Rays, it should be limiting the home runs, because there's not too many flaws with their pitching. They're not giving up too many hits in the series, but the home runs from really every team, that's what kills them. And there's not too many flaws, as mentioned, but if they can do that, that should help them out. And for the Astros, just being able to plate runners while they're in scoring position, because they have a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of guys who have proven time and time again that they can hit in the playoffs. So I think for those 2 teams, those are the keys. How about you?
I would for sure agree with the Astros. I think they need to do a better job of manufacturing runs. And yeah, for the Rays, trying to limit the long ball as well. I think that's another good one. And not letting those Astros sluggers slug the way that they can and the way they had been coming into this series. I think, just the way the home run has impacted baseball in the postseason. Like you said, Adam, I think anytime limiting the long ball is always going to be a good idea. And I think another key for the Astros, too, would be if they can clean up their defense and not give the Rays anything for free, it certainly would help their chances in making a comeback. But yeah, like we've been mentioning, the Astros actually still ahead in this game, 3-2, now heading into the 8th inning, I believe. I missed exactly what inning it was right before. They're on a commercial break right now, but the Astros could be nearing bringing this series to 3-2, and then they'd only be 2 wins away from the World Series.
As crazy as it sounds, the Astros will only be the second team ever to come back from a 3-0 deficit in the American League Championship Series. They have Valdez going tomorrow, I believe, and then they could have maybe even Greinke going in a Game 7 scenario or pitching in some form. And Greinke just seems like an animal now. He seems like the guy who just, no matter the situation, he'll come through. He seems like a clutch postseason performer.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Adam. He is as cool as a cucumber. I can't talk tonight, man. But yeah, he's got, he's cool under pressure. He has got ice water in his veins. And he's a guy that has been in that big moment before and is clearly not afraid to have the ball in the big moments. I would be afraid if I was the Rays and I let that game get to Game 7, not just of Zach Greinke, but certainly of the momentum shift that would have to occur for that to happen. But as we've mentioned, that momentum could already be shifting. The Astros could be looking to put together their second win in a row, and don't call it a comeback, man.
Even Lance McCullers could come out and pitch for them. He was electric in Game 2. This was vintage Lance McCullers, who in 2017 ALCS threw like 27 curveballs in a row and just got by and helped the Astros advance to the World Series. And he just looked like he was back to form. This is a name who was not around for a couple years because of Tommy John surgery. People kind of forgot about him, forgot about how good he was, but he's lighting up the radar gun, 97 plus, wipe out off speed pitches. The Astros have a secretly good rotation. Even in their bullpen, you have random guys who I've never heard before the playoffs, such as Brian Javier and Hanoli Paredes. And then, of course, Ryan Presley came over from the Twins. They are secretly good with their pitching. So if they can win tonight, of course, they have to win tonight. Like you said, don't call it a comeback.
Kind of a weird concept, too, the Astros having to be sneakily good with their pitching because they've been like very obviously good with their pitching for the last several years. But yeah, you take Garrett Cole out of that equation, you put Justin Verlander on the shelf, and Lance McCullers recovering from Tommy Johns, like you said. But certainly great to see him coming back, like you mentioned as well, Adam, that for all the hate that we do have for the Astros, you never want to root against a guy coming back from Tommy John surgery. So awesome to see Lance McCullers living his best life and back to postseason dominance. He is the one Astro I can be happy for.
Yeah, I do think he has this certain swagger about him, and he just didn't seem like he was in the forefront of the sign stealing scandal, such as Correa and Altuve, who were very outspoken about it and just made me lose a lot of respect for those two, which I didn't think was possible since I really enjoyed them. But moving on to the National League Championship Series, the other day was ridiculous, utterly ridiculous.
That was just last night, actually. And I saw some tweet this morning talking about there was a long laundry list of records broken in that Game 3 of the Dodgers-Braves series, in which the Dodgers come out and score 11 runs in the top of the first inning. That is including 3 home runs in the top. It was 3 home runs in the top of the first. I think it was like the most runs ever in an inning of a playoff game, like the most extra base hits ever in an inning of a playoff game. Most ever in the first inning of a playoff game. It was ridiculous. It goes on, and just how deflating to be the Braves and just to have an 11 spot put up on you in the first inning. I mean, how do you even really use actual pitchers from that point on? You don't want to waste any arms, but I mean, credit to the Dodgers being behind 2-0 in the series and then just coming out with such an exclamation point to just really recapture all the momentum in that series to where now, Adam, I believe you're actually picking them to come out on top of that series. Is that correct?
I think I do, and it's controversial, I know, but and I'll take a line from some of the broadcasters such as A-Rod and David Ortiz, who are, I guess, recappers of the Game 2, and that's when the Braves were down 8-3 in the bottom of the ninth. They come back and score 4 runs. Cody Bellinger, who was slumping the entire playoffs, comes out with a 2-out triple and runner on third base, and that's how the game ends. And they kept saying, this is as much of a momentum shift as you can get from a game that they lost. And then, what do you know? They come out with 11 runs in Game 3. players who were struggling, such as Matt Muncy. He had a grand slam in Game 3. Bellinger had a home run of his own. Corey Seager looks like the best hitter on the planet after a phenomenal, underrated 2020 season where he hit like 16 home runs. So they look like they're in check, and they have Kershaw going tonight for them too.
They are looking scary. They very much look like a sleeping giant has emerged with the Dodgers. And I appreciate you reeling in my comment on the momentum shifting. That really did start in Game 2. And another very, very strange game, and that the Braves were winning 7-0 in that game and end up only winning that ball game 8-7 with the late Dodgers comeback, like you mentioned, Adam. So it really has been all Dodgers for the last now 14 or so innings. So, I mean, I think tonight's game is pivotal in this series, and 3-1, obviously worlds apart from 2-2. And the Braves have got to right the ship and come back out. And who actually do the Braves have on the mound tonight, Adam?
I believe his name is Bry Wilson. I haven't heard of him before, but I think the Braves are kind of running out of options because after Fried, Anderson, and Wright was absolutely terrible. I believe he was the first postseason pitcher to give up 7 earned runs without completing the first inning yesterday. That's how bad he was. And Anderson and Fried can give the Braves a good one too. But I don't know much about Wilson. It's a bullpen day. The Braves have a very, very talented bullpen. They actually have a guy named Tyler Matzik who had a 5-year layoff between major league stints and has come out as throwing 98, and they call him the Death Star because he just limits the damage and is their secret weapon in the Braves bullpen. So if they can maybe just throw out some long relievers and then go to their A guys and try to go up 3-1 and beat Kershaw, that would really help them out.
Absolutely. And I actually didn't realize that game is already underway. They're in bottom of the second now and still tied 0-0. But the Braves are certainly going to have to hope for a classic Clayton Kershaw playoff meltdown, perhaps, if they want to regain the momentum in this series. But that really hasn't been the Clayton Kershaw of the 2020 playoffs, Adam. He's had a pretty phenomenal postseason. And is that something that you're expecting to continue in tonight?
Honestly, you kind of hope it does. You never know. Anything can change, but I think he made a statement when he came out in that National League wildcard game and had 13 strikeouts. That was as peak of a Kershaw moment, and he's still lingering around. He still might get some down ballot Cy Young votes. He's not going to win it, of course. He's not in his prime anymore, but he's still around. He's still one of the better pitchers in the game, and I think this time around, in a special year, in a year where the Dodgers aren't finessed by the Red Sox stealing signs or the Astros stealing signs, I feel like this is finally Kershaw's renaissance.
He's always been the one Dodger that I've really had a soft spot for, in a roster that I really don't care too much for. Don't get me wrong, they're phenomenal players. They are one of baseball's super teams and arguably the best team in baseball. I just don't love the Dodgers. They've knocked my Cubs out of the playoffs a couple too many times for me to really cozy up to them too much. But me, growing up playing baseball, being a left-handed pitcher, Clayton Kershaw was absolutely the perfect role model, the guy who I wanted to throw exactly like. And I want to see him succeed in the postseason too. I would love to see him get a ring. So it's awesome to see him dominating just how effectively he has in the postseason. He's got a .7 whip in postseason play, a 1.93 ERA, both of which should be by far career lows for him in the postseason, I would imagine, because it's usually so awful.
And it's interesting because he hasn't been like downright terrible in the postseason. He's really just been up and down. Some starts were pretty good, some starts were just awful, but this isn't Kershaw in the postseason has like a high 3, maybe a low 4 ERA. And now he looks like vintage Kershaw, where he won back-to-back Cy Young Awards, won MVP award. This is the Kershaw we all know and love, and it's just historic because we're going to continue to see him in the playoffs, but this could finally be his year, and it's nice to see him get the ball in really a must-win game for the Dodgers.
Absolutely, and frankly, I'm kind of rooting for. Oh, hold up! I am so sorry. I just got totally distracted. I was going to say I'm rooting for the Braves. But breaking news, the Rays appear to have tied the game 3-3 in the top of the ninth. They're down to 2 outs. So I don't know if they tied it with 2 outs or if they tied it earlier, but there's a man on second base. Go Rays. The Rays are brewing, trying to steal that game from the Astros and finish that series off. I am sorry, Adam. I got way
No,
off
you
track
have to,
there
yeah.
from Dodgers Braves.
No, thank you for interrupting. That is crucial. And as mentioned, how big would it be for the Rays to make the World Series for the first time since 2008? How big would it be for all the Astros hate that we didn't get this year because there weren't any fans in the ballpark until the NLCS? So that is perfect for the Rays. And most baseball fans in America must be very happy right now. And I think an underrated aspect of them winning today would be that they have rest. And I know some teams, it's never really been proven. There's not really a strong correlation if more rest is better or less rest is better. But in a series in a playoff format where you're playing every single day, they could certainly use that. It can certainly use an extra couple days off.
That's a great point, Adam, to where normally I think that you can make the case for rest versus rust. But like you just said, in a postseason like this where there are no off days and it's every single day, I think rest becomes so much more important. And that really could be a leg up to finish that series off early and get your studs ready to start the series, especially if Atlanta and I think it would hurt Atlanta more so than the Dodgers if that series were to go late. And then the Braves were to make it to the World Series.
My bad. My audio
paused
for a second, so I didn't mean to interrupt you there. But I think there's little doubt in my mind that at least the NLCS won't go to 6 games. So once again, the Rays can finish it off tonight. Then they have all their starters fresh and ready, which they kind of need because, for example, Glass now threw in 2 2.3 innings pitched on 2 days rest in the ALDS, and I'm sure he would love a couple extra days and just pitch on normal rest. And the same goes for Blake Snell. And you might see that rest versus rust play out once again, and it could be even more prevalent this year because it still is tough to play every single day, very intense games, and then have a few-day layoff. So the Dodgers can have an edge there too. But if all their starters and their players and their bullpen are tired and the Rays are not, I think the advantage goes Rays in that scenario.
I would agree with you, Adam, too. I think that the rest would definitely pay off there for Tampa Bay. And not only resetting the starters and allowing them to be fresh heading into that series, I think they can definitely more effectively use that bullpen when their starters are fresh. You don't have to ask Diego Castillo or Nick Anderson to do anything too weird and take the ball for 2 innings here and a weird bullpen game. I think, having the starters fresh would definitely help out everybody from the pitching end for Tampa Bay. But I am hoping they can just put that nail in the coffin on the Astros, man. And baseball gods, please let it happen. Knock those Astros out.
It'd be the one time I'm really excited for baseball Twitter, which can be a strange place to say the least, and a lot of controversial comments where controversial players such as Trevor Bauer remain king. So that'd be hilarious to see his comments and just comments in general if that happens.
I would like to see Bauer rip on the Astros a little bit, just mainly because I want to see everybody rip on the Astros. But I don't know, man. Something about Trevor Bauer just does not rub me the right way, and maybe it's because he was a Red and an Indian before that, not 2 of my favorite teams. But I don't know. I don't know if I love his persona that much either. But he's an entertaining guy. I think most people can agree with that.
I think love him or hate him, like he's great for baseball. He is such a weird guy. He wants to take 1-year contracts. He talked about his dating advice, which we can't get completely into here, but you should certainly look it up on Sports Illustrated because it is very strange and very abnormal and odd that he would make it so public like that. So he is insane. I know that the Yankees are trying to look after him, and he used to play in UCLA with Garrett Cole. Apparently they had beef, but Bauer denies it. So that would also be an interesting storyline and who he'll sign with and if he'll take a 1-year deal in a very special offseason, which teams might be reluctant to hand out higher paying contracts. So he'll definitely be a player to watch for sure.
Yeah, man. And you're just giving me goosebumps thinking ahead to free agency. And It is definitely going to be a weird looking process this year, coming off the strange season, and then two with the labor negotiations looming after 2021.
Oh wow.
It'll be interesting to see how teams go about handing out contracts, or rather not handing out those big contracts. I agree with you. I think that the money might be kind of hard to come by this offseason.
I didn't even think about the labor contracts. That feels like a year ago.
Ah, man, it's coming back soon. Can't get away from it.
That was really ugly. No one was enjoying that, and there was so much hate and disagreement on both sides, and so many strong opinions. It was not good for baseball in the slightest.
And I'm afraid that may only be the appetizer, my friend.
I think you're right. Well, before we wrap this up, who are your World Series picks, Henry, and how do you think the series will go?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's kind of chalky, but I'm sticking with Dodgers. Or I'm sorry, that's not at all what I'm sticking with. I don't know why I said that. I'm sticking with Rays, and I do expect the Braves to still make it out over the Dodgers. But like we said, tonight's matchup in Game 4 is going to play a huge role in how that pans out. If the Dodgers do end up tying the series tonight, making it 2-2. I would 100% flip my pick to the Dodgers. But if it is a Rays Braves World Series, as I predict, I would say Rays in 6.
I agree. I don't think the Braves would have too much of a chance against the Rays, or I should say Braves wouldn't have too much of a chance against the Rays. I think the Dodgers can maybe live up to that, especially if they can win in 6 rather than 7. But probably the winner tonight will be able to win it all. And I think if that does happen, if it's Dodgers Rays, I think it'll be really interesting because I think the Rays will win in 6, and I think Kershaw. How fitting would be if he won World Series MVP and the Dodgers, or if the Dodgers win, he'll be World Series MVP, or vice versa. If the Rays win, if the Rays can shell the Dodgers bullpen, which is pretty good, but they could be tired, and the Rays can take advantage of that.
Absolutely. I mean, that would be awesome to see Kershaw make it to the peak of the mountain there. And I mean, the Dodgers bullpen has been a little bit concerning at times throughout the postseason. I know they've had to discuss. Dave Roberts was initially non-committal about how he wanted to use Kenley Jansen heading into the NLCS. Kenley having had a couple rocky outings in the NLDS series. And then I know Blake Trinan struggled for them as well a couple games ago against Atlanta. So maybe the back end of the bullpen, perhaps not quite as reliable as it has been in years past for the Dodgers. So I think that's another big key for the Braves in this series is just trying to get to those Dodgers starters early and making them lean on that bullpen that's been a little bit spotty.
And that's certainly doable for the Braves. Freddie Freeman's been on fire since the start of the series, as is Ozzie Albies, who, fun story about him, whenever he's had a home run, Mark Melancon has caught his home run ball, which is just absolutely hilarious. And both times the Braves won. So that could be a secret key to the game in the Braves-Dodgers series too.
Yeah, absolutely. Watch out for Mark Melancon catching those balls. I hadn't heard that. That's a pretty awesome story.
Yeah. Well, I believe that just about does it on our podcast. So of course we'll keep you.
No, Adam, Carlos Correa walks it off. And with a walk-off home run, the Astros have taken Game 5, 4-3. Ugh, gross.
If I wasn't on air right now, I'd probably use an obscenity because I did not want to hear that. I'm glad we mentioned that before the show ends.
Dang, like right as you were doing the sign-off.
Well, that's perfect timing, honestly.
Yeah, we fit it in.
Yeah. Oh, God. Well, it will be interesting to see if Valdez and then McCullers will go Game 6 and 7, which might be pretty tough for the Rays. And honestly, the world's against the Astros. If they can come back from 3-0, the world won't immediately be open arms again, but they'll earn some respect for downing the Rays for sure.
That would be some respect regained for the Astros. Probably would also raise some questions to how they started banging on a trash can or something after Game 3. What changed? Did they start cheating again? But hopefully the Rays can just cap it off and punch their ticket to the World Series. But the nerves got to you got to start to feel them a little bit as Tampa Bay going from 3-0 to now 3-2. You got to get it done game 6. Don't want to let that go to game 7.
I think the Astros push it to game 7. I think that'd be incredibly scary. Not that the Rays wouldn't be set with their relievers, but they still use the relievers a lot. They still have their tier 1 relievers like any team. With McCullers and Greinke maybe going back-to-back off each other and Glasnow or Snell pitching on short rest, I don't know. I think the Astros could be in a pretty good position if they make it game 7.
Yeah, the rotation is set up nicely for them. Tampa Bay, man, take care of business here, game 6.
Yeah, we will find out, and next time we talk, it'll be the World Series, so we will see how that turns out. Maybe we'll even do a live stream of the World Series. We'll have to discuss that, but until next time, thank you all for tuning in. From me and my partner, Henry Winkelhake, thank you for joining in the ALCS and Velo podcast, and until next week.